Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
Oh, this week we're going to get into our second installment of our Pedro Almodóvar Festival 2006, Volver.
Let's dive on in.
All right, do it.
All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Poulter.
And if you like what you see/hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people find good media. This is the second installment of our Pedro Almodóvar Festival.
Yes.
A big transition from our first movie of Talk to Her in some ways.
Yeah, it's a very different movie.
Yeah, very different movie. It left me feeling very differently.
Oh, yeah.
Than Talk to Her
Talk
did.
to Her was a heavy movie. And
Yeah.
this movie has heavy moments. Like I said before, I think he paints these dark corners into his worlds.
Always. Yeah, I think they're always kind of there.
He does have a little Haneke in him, honestly. And I think that's a fair comparison, but we're only 2 movies into this, so maybe we'll know a little more about
For a guy who has like 25 movies, I think it's my...
That's a good point.
So, but yeah, this one definitely, how do I even say this? There are multiple moments in this movie that made me swoon. That made me just feel...
It's much more lighthearted and floaty.
And just like made me feel in love with the idea of being alive, if that's a way. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but it's like
statement.
Well, just this feeling of like because I feel like that's what he was trying to telegraph. I feel like in this movie, what Almodóvar was trying to say is like, life is complex, crazy bad shit can happen to you. You can at times feel really sullied or vindictive. But then you're going to have these moments of just like heart-aching beauty. You know what I mean? And like, and when those things happen, they might happen in inopportune times. So you got to just stop and let that wash over you and then keep going with your life. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like, I don't know, like I know it's a big statement right out of the gates, but it just, because this movie, you can't really say it's about this one thing.
No, there's a myriad of emotions that you go through in this movie, and some of them are sad, some of them are happy, some of them are beautiful, some of them are depressing,
surreal, and have this like magical realism
just this
to
opening scene of all these ladies, wives, mothers, widows, daughters cleaning headstones, and it's packed in there. Yeah, it is fucking packed. So they must do this every day.
Yep.
And so right away he's hitting on his culture, and especially what happens when you die. He hits on that a lot throughout this movie. The traditions of a lot of those things that aren't traditions that we probably understand, right? Yeah. And so it was really interesting to see the cultural tradition side of what he's doing around everything. Even the greetings of these ladies who's
it's so physical.
It's so much kissing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then just and even hearing these women talk in the very beginning about like cleaning of the headstones is not a sad endeavor. No. They're all laughing and joking, and these old women are coming in and they're cleaning their own headstones, right? And they're like, oh, it makes me feel good, and I get to see everybody in the neighborhood, and it just has, and so this movie was based in the town that he grew up in. And so it's funny because in interviews, both he himself says this and people asked him about this, like, oh, this movie isn't as colorful as some of your other films. And I'm like, it's not? And he's like, yeah, I chose to use a lot of sort of slates and grays and things. And I'm like, you did? Right? And so which is bonkers to me because it is so colorful and vibrant.
Yeah, it's totally vibrant.
But I think even compared to some of his other stuff, it's maybe a little toned down, which I thought was really funny. But yeah, so this La Mancha, that's the name of the town. Yeah. And he wanted to make something that was really about his introspective thoughts around death. I mean, a lot of this movie has to do with death, for sure. Right? And which is like, again, to say this movie has a lot to do with death, and it is such a joyful, fun movie to watch. Is such a great juxtaposition in and of itself.
Totally. They handle it in a very unique way. He's a very unique director. I mean, where do we start? I mean, they go to see their aunt, They go and see their aunt. This really kind of prompts We see these ladies at the beginning, they're cleaning the headstones, and we follow them a little bit, and they're maids. But they go to see their aunt, who's a little wacko or whatever.
She's losing it. She doesn't recognize.
They've lost their mother recently in a fire.
The last, less than 5 years before, there had been a wildfire. And so you have Ramunda and you have Sole, and then you have Ramunda's daughter, Paula. And they go to visit Aunt Paula, who is senile and doesn't know who Soleil is, right? And is like, she seems like kind of a bitch. And it's like, that's your...
Oh, she's...
that's your niece. That's my sister. And, there's...
Obviously losing it.
But there's a lot of talk right from the beginning about death, about ghosts. There's lots of conversations around ghosts.
In spirits.
Spirits, and they go to visit Agustina, who lives next door, who I love that character. She's rad. Just with her, shaved head and, smoking pot and, talking about how her mom was one of the only hippies in the town and showing daughter Paula the plastic jewelry.
This is very much a movie about mothers and relationships.
Just women in general, and this
that too, but the things you take from your mother and that you become of, and even this is maybe a crude example, but even at near we're 3/4 into the movie and she's like, have you always had a big chest? And, stuff like that. Just weird things that that women go through, or conversations that they have.
Just the hidden world of femininity, which I think is what
especially in a culture where I'm not sure how women are treated, but I assume they don't seem ill-treated in this film. Anyways.
Well, Almodóvar...
outside of her asshole fucking terrible husband.
Right, exactly, which is we'll get to in a second. But Almodóvar talks about this and says he was surrounded by powerful women in his childhood.
You can tell.
He says, women were very happy, worked hard, and always spoke. They handed me the first sensations and forged my character. The woman represented everything to me. The man was absent and represented authority. I never identified with the male figure. Maternity inspires me more than paternity. And this movie is a love letter to that, really. Sure. I mean, it is about how, the women get shit done, right? And the men are either A, in the way, or B, actively ruining the things that the women are trying to do.
I love the little breadcrumbs of her mom might be around still, in some way, whether it's a spirit throughout the town, or and it's old wives' tale or whatever, or if it's actually happening. We get this moment when they go to see Aunt Paula, and she's like, "Your mother cooks," and they're eating treats that she made, that they're baked just like her mom. So they're just all, there's so many breadcrumbs that they lay throughout the movie of what's happening. Even the TV being on, she's like, I'm blind. It was about a fire, so she wanted to turn it off.
Yeah, but she didn't know what it was. She didn't know what it was. She's like,
I'm blind, but so who's watching TV?
Exactly.
Right?
Well, and I think that it's all of those elements that only after experiencing the movie all the way through, really till almost the end, because, well, I guess we're jumping around a little bit, but this idea of their mother, Irene, that she might still be alive, or she's this ghost. Really, no one is saying she's alive. There's this sense of her presence is still somewhere here, right? Yeah. And later,
but we're seeing actual trails of a human
being being there, and
smells.
And
right?
later, when Aunt Paula dies and Soleil goes to the funeral, she sees her mother, right, and runs away, and she's like, "I saw a ghost." Well, this idea of whether or not Irene is a ghost exists as its own secondary thread that's kind of a joke at times, but also it isn't until literally...
I'm questioning it the whole time, right?
It isn't until almost the very end of the movie that in a conversation between Raimunda and Irene, do you actually realize, oh, Irene is alive? And Almodóvar said that was totally on purpose. That's exactly what he wanted. He wanted to use this magical realism. I mean, it reminds me of somebody like the author Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who did 100 Years of Solitude.
Yeah.
Uses a lot of similar kind of ideas based around magical realism. Is this a ghost? And it's a ghost who she has to dye her hair.
One of the first things I wrote down when we meet her character is that she talks about how tired she was from the trip. I'm like, that's a pretty human experience thing. If she's a ghost, why would she be tired?
And it's funny stuff too, where she's knocking she's knocking on the boot of the car.
It was a fun little thread to follow, though.
And she's like, "You can't be my mother. My mother's dead." And she's like, "Well, if your mother's dead, she's still in the boot of the car. You have to open the trunk of the car." And she lets her out, and she's like, "Ah." No wonder you were scared of me. Look at my hair, you know? It's all of that stuff. Her pretending to be Russian because they would be able to hear, like, the Castile in her accent. And all of these little moments, again, are very funny and playful. But at the same time, as an audience, like we said with Talk to Her, we're not treated dumb.
Yeah.
We are left with this feeling of, like, he puts us in the same position that Soleil is of she might be a ghost. Maybe this is what a ghost is like. Maybe a ghost wants you to dye their hair.
I gotta say, they do an amazing job. And Penelope Cruz is fucking awesome here. We haven't mentioned her yet, but she's outstanding as Ramunda. But I thought they did a brilliant job with how long they spent in the movie by not telling her. Like, they were able to hide it from her for a long time. And I was kind of impressed with that. Because usually that's something that's like a second act kind of thing.
Yeah,
you really don't find out. No. She doesn't find out until probably middle of the third act.
And that gives her really her big dramatic arc because she's learned how to fend for herself. Let's talk about Penelope Cruz for a minute. First of all, watching this movie made me realize that every director who has had Penelope Cruz in their movie...
It's using her wrong.
Yes. They have no fucking idea what they're doing. She is the most incredible character here. Yeah. Like, she is magnetic, and you can't help but watch her in every single second that she is on film here. And she's and the character of Raimunda might be one of the more interesting women character in a movie I've seen in, I don't know, maybe ever. Like, I love her. Like, I want to see a whole trilogy of this character dealing with things in her life. Like, she is so incredible. In fact, the only unbelievable thing is that a woman this strong would ever be with a piece of shit like Paco.
Yeah, let's get to
That's
Paco.
The only thing that I'm like, I don't buy that.
Yeah,
like, that's the only part.
That's true, especially looking where she came from and her family and her upbringing and the traditions and stuff like I said.
He's kind of just...
Where Paco, again, I mentioned this in the Talk to Her episode, but like, he does not frame his male characters very well in most of his movies.
No.
And I think we should expect that moving forward. I'm just guessing.
Oh, yeah.
These two definitely do not portray men in a good light.
Yes.
Especially Paco. He's probably the worst guy I've ever met. One of them. He immediately...
Next to the husband in Malignant. Those two guys should go bowling together.
That's actually a pretty good comparison. But this guy immediately, we cut to him. There's beer cans everywhere.
Yep.
She's cleaning up after him.
He's lost his job.
He just lost his job. He doesn't care. Just let me watch the game is what he says.
Yep.
I think something like that.
Just like the guy from Malignant.
Then he fucking checks out his daughter. That's where I'm like, whoa, what the fuck? Dude?
Who's got to be, what, 12? I think they say 14.
Yeah, 14 years old.
At one point.
And I'm just like, did he just check out his daughter?
Yeah.
Like, where is this movie going?
Yeah.
And
that was incredible. It was so uncomfortable.
As soon as he gets in bed, he's like jerking off, trying to like get Penelope Cruz
climbing all over.
Yeah. And she's like, no, dude, like just fucking back off. And then he just starts jerking off. Like, does so many abhorrent things in a small amount of time.
The guy's only in the movie.
Yeah.
He had to do, that actor had to do a lot of heavy lifting because he's literally in the movie for like 4 minutes, and we have to hate him for the rest of the movie.
That is a good point. That is some heavy lifting.
Because the heavy lifting is when they're carrying around his corpse later.
Good one.
But again, we have to, that shit has to be funny. That shit can't be tragic. That shit has to be for comedic value. So it means this guy has to be the biggest douchebag humanly possible.
It's pretty interesting
in order for that stuff to work.
That's a good point. Because we kind of stopped caring that she killed someone. We never really did because it was justified. It was in self-defense.
It was more like, oh God, I hope they don't get in trouble.
Yeah. But just the whole idea of like dragging a body around and trying to get rid of it and all that stuff is just like, it's always there, but like, we care more about Raimunda and like her mom's situation than any of that. We want her and Paula to be okay. Yeah. And so it becomes a problem to get rid of. Yeah. They move it to the restaurant. I mean, he literally just has a body in a freezer.
And
Weekend at Bernie's stuff.
It's totally Weekend at Bernie's, and it's very light in its own way, and that works so well.
But also there's really good tension too. I feel like
there's a Hitchcockian kind of a vibe there of like, is someone going to find out?
But I agree with you, Raymunda. Like, I love her. Like, she's a good person. Like, even when she sees she gets a call to have someone come look at the restaurant, she fesses up.
Yep.
And she becomes honest. She's like, hey, I did you wrong. I'm sorry.
But at the same time, she's doing that and also using her feminine wiles to make sure she can manipulate this dude, because she knows, and we know as the audience from a little bit of exposition, that dude really likes Raymunda, right? And so she can say, I know, I'm just such a ditzy lady, like I forgot, right? And that leads me to, if I may, I want to do a little bit of professor bullshit here, if I can.
Put on your hat.
All right. Almodóvar in interviews talked about this concept of, because, you know, this movie in a lot of ways is a love letter to the Italian neorealism scene. So a lot of Fellini, a lot of that era, right?
Okay, I can see it.
And so this is the kind of stuff that he grew up on, was that Italian neorealism. And the term he kept using in interviews about the character of Raimunda was the Marguerite. And the Marguerite was basically, it started off as this concept of like the buxom woman in these Italian neorealism films, right? Like, again, the big chest and usually kind of tall and like the, you know, very hippie and curvy and all this. But if you think about the time period that Italian neorealism started in the 1940s, this is right after the fall of like the fascist republic in Italy, right?
Okay, yep.
And so this is like, everything's changing. Italian neorealism at the time were movies about poor people, about people who were unemployed, about people trying to make it through in life. Mm-hmm. And this character of the Marguerite, of being a buxom and full-figured woman, actually, what it did is it flew in the face of the conservatism, the post-fascist conservatism that was happening at that time and place, which was, here are all these people falling all over themselves, trying to put the current Italy back together. You've got the Catholics, and they're trying to do one thing. You've got the politicians, they're trying to do another thing. And then you have these like workhorse women who are like deeply dead sexy, that don't have time for men's shit, and they're just going to get some shit done, right? Again, this is going on film, and people are like, oh shit, like they're the stronger sex, like they're equal to men in these movies, right? And it was like this really cool, sexy, subversive thing, right? Yeah. And so this is something that Almodóvar talks about a lot, of being like, who is the ultimate mother figure? It isn't just a woman that's there to like feed a man and take care of him. She is dead sexy in her own right and doesn't need you. Like, that's the hottest thing on the planet. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so when he basically cast Penelope Cruz, he made her go and watch a bunch of these Italian neorealism films that starred Sophia Loren.
Ah, okay. I can
and
see
you
that.
Go, hell yeah, because Sophia Loren is the Marguerite. Like, that is the perfect embodiment of that woman.
Well,
where it's like, she's
Penelope
a femme
Cruz
fatale.
Is the embodiment of that?
Oh my God, completely
right?
here.
That's why I think she becomes a pretty regular in a lot of his movies.
Yeah, she has the swagger, and it's not to lure men into things, or maybe it is to lure men into things, but it's not because they're like
film crew. She's kind of flirting with.
Yeah,
right?
She's flirting with him, but she's also like, yeah, you guys should come back tomorrow night and spend more money.
yeah,
right. Like,
she's got an angle.
She knows exactly what she's doing. But this idea of the Marguerite, I'd never even heard that term
I haven't
before.
Either. That's really interesting.
And he kept using that phrase, and I'm like, I got to figure out what this thing is. And it's such a fascinating idea, but it's also, for a 1950s era, it's super subversive, because it's kind of like, it makes me think of like old Russ Meyer films, like the Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. Like, you know, the biker women like that are just like, oh, they're huge badasses in their own right. Mm-hmm. And like men are going to be turned on by them, but should also really watch their back around them.
Should fear them.
They should fear them. They should have a healthy dose of fear. And that's why I'm saying Penelope Cruz, you know, America first got to know her in Vanilla Sky.
Yeah.
And her character's like, she's cute, I guess, but she's like a pixie dream girl.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not the right thing. And to think she went from pixie dream girl to 4 years later doing this? Mm-hmm. Fuck you.
Well,
we don't know how to use her. America doesn't know how to use her in films. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I know I finished your sentence there saying that earlier, so
it's totally true.
Interesting. I continue to think about just how they play along with the reality of this movie.
Yes.
Because when it comes down to it, everything's real. Right?
Yeah.
There's nothing, there's no spirit, there's
no supernatural, supernatural, all real.
And I think of the first time that Soul sees her mom.
Yeah.
And she runs away, and she goes into this room full of old men. And you're like, holy shit, can she just see dead people now? Like,
oh my God.
What just happened?
You know what that scene actually made me think?
Find out you're at a funeral.
You know what that scene made me think a lot about, actually? Was the scene in Silence of the Lambs when Jodie Foster goes in to very first see the dead body, and the room is full of all those male cops.
Yeah.
And they're all giving her the male stare. And again, a movie directed by a man, but obviously trying to put yourself in the mind of a woman in that scene. And that's exactly what Soul deals with in walking in there. And it's like she goes into the men's room, right? Like all the old men are in there. No, all the women are over here. They're mourning separately. And when she goes in there, they're all like little banshees, all dressed in black, all these little old women. Like,
but you definitely get the fact that, like, oh shit, that are all of them dead too? Are they just all hanging out together?
Yeah. Or like
all of her past relatives or people that she knows in the family. Like,
it's so interesting.
Like I don't know. It just kind of turned on the switch. Obviously, that's not what it was, and they're just at a funeral, and that's it's the.
But it's haunting. It's a haunting moment.
But right after, it was a really fun kind of twist to throw in there, even though it was just a momental thing. It was really fun to throw in there.
Yeah, so definitely.
I love that she's successful. And what she does, like, you know,
Ramunda?
Yeah, Ramunda.
Yeah.
Like, just the restaurant going well. She lights it up and makes it look great.
That moment
makes it her own.
When she's walking down the street and she's stopping every neighbor.
I need some of that.
I need some sausage and
some fruit.
Like, you brought back cookies. Really, with your blood sugar? I mean, you know, and you wanted to lose a couple of pounds. Like, how many boxes?
She's manipulative, but in
like the sweetest.
And she does. She keeps her word, I guess.
It's like any movie, man. You want to watch somebody who's smart and good at stuff do their thing.
Yeah.
Right? And Ramunda is like, she is smart and she is good at this shit. Like I said, the only unbelievable part is that she would ever hook up with Paco.
It's true. It's the only thing.
But it is like, she's such a massive badass in this movie. This movie, again, much like Talk to Her, has a musical interlude moment.
I was going to ask about that.
With this kind of live music. Now, this is the only thing that I was like, oh, that's too bad, is that it is not Penelope Cruz singing. Yeah. Although she did obviously practice her ass off on doing a lip sync, because I looked it up, because a lot of times you're like, well, that's not them.
Yeah.
But I was like, that could be her.
Yeah.
But again, the nylon strings on the flamenco guitar, everybody's sitting. I was just like, can I walk out my back door into that bar?
Yeah, right.
I want to just go hang out on that patio with those people and like have a couple of drinks and a couple of smokes and listen to the songs, because it is like, and it's a song from her past. It is the song Volver.
It's what it's the movie's named after, of course. Which and I don't know if we said this earlier, but it means in English to return or go back.
Right. Well, and you know, Almodóvar said that he loves having music in his movies. He thinks that it's an integral part. It usually does always hinge around this one song. I think there's 3 different versions of Volver that play in this. Like, some of them are orchestral, and then one is actually the flamenco version.
Her mom's crying in the car. Oh man!
I know. I know. It's incredible. And again, that's when I started to go, maybe she isn't a ghost. Because does a ghost have to hide in a car
or cry? Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean? Like, is that right?
Ghosts don't cry.
Ghosts don't cry. God, what a magical movie, though. Like,
it really
again,
was.
For it to have murder in it, for it to have sort of a pedophilic aspect in one part, for it to have, like, you know, death and ghosts and funerals and people dying in fires.
But the whole point of the movie is for the mom to come back from the dead to resolve some things that she didn't get solved in life, right? That's kind of the pitch of the movie. And it's really interesting that, you know, what we end up finding is that she wanted Ramunda to forgive her. That's the whole reason.
That's the whole reason why she did it.
But then, of course, she ran it down. Paula could see how desperate she was for help and decided to take care of her and live this life secretly and hiding everywhere. And really funny in that she hides in Soul's car and just like pops out like, "Hey, I need to get out of there."
Knocking on the back of the car.
Following you.
Yeah,
sorry.
No.
Another great moment where Raimunda goes, she kind of pops in and goes to the bathroom, and she said, "It smells like my mom's farts."
Mom's farts. And she's underneath the bed, and she's... one thing I wanted to mention that I thought was really interesting is both in Talk to Her and in this, there is a scene of a television program where a character that we care about is being bullied on an interview show. Both movies have that, and it was really interesting to me because it made me feel like almost that Almodóvar. It's a way of him saying, obviously, as somebody who loves media and loves filmmaking as an art form, has a real low opinion of television media.
Oh yeah, and she even says, "I hate TV."
Right
in this movie, she turns it off. She never wants it on.
It's just really interesting though, because it's almost like he and he's so protective of his characters that he has those characters that he cares about and we care about victimized on these TV shows by people pretending that they care. Yeah. Right? Both of these women are bullied.
They get taken advantage of.
They get taken advantage of by interviewers. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting theme in addition to everything else that's happening here. A little connecting piece. I have to say, I'm so excited for the rest of this festival because... I
was going to ask you, so how are you feeling about Almodóvar?
I feel like we've almost seen two opposite ends of the spectrum. A movie that's almost exclusively about men and men putting their own concepts and ideas on women, and another movie that's about women so much so that the men in it aren't even worth being killed on screen. We have two pivotal deaths.
That's another example.
Have two pivotal deaths in this movie: Paco and Raimunda's dad,
and also the abduction.
Yeah, and all of that happens off screen because they're not even worth. They're not even worth showing in this movie.
This is why I love doing these festivals, because we find those little nuggets like that.
Yeah.
And that's a really important part of how he tells a story, I think.
Yeah.
Not showing that and keeping it all inside, keeping it emotional, because if you see those physical acts happening, you're going to attach a different emotion to it as if you didn't witness it, right?
That is it. And like seeing that awful scene of Paco coming onto Paula, her having to stab
even
him,
that
all
on
of that
screen for 10 seconds was gross. I can't imagine watching, like, don't that's where he's not Haneke, maybe. Because Haneke would show that.
Would show it. Yeah. He would stick with it for a while. He'd make a whole movie just about that scene. It's called Funny Games. But instead you go, he sits on, my God, that young actress who plays Paula.
Oh, yeah.
Her face when Raimunda gets off the bus.
Oh, yeah.
And is asking her what's wrong.
You know something's wrong.
Holy shit, that acting, though, without saying a word, it's just this face. And she looks like she's going to...
I'm glad the movie went there and was able to get beyond it as well. Because it's more about Raimunda and her family. And because that's not an easy thing to do, to put that in your first act and then have the other two acts
somehow be able to
although the body stuff is great, and then burying like the cooler and all that stuff. And, like, you know, there's some fun moments.
It somehow gets funny, but you're right, that dismount from that scene as an opener, and my God, but again, that's where that strength pops up. You know, Raimunda says to her, she says, "Don't you ever forget I did this." And that's like it's like she, not for 1 second does she feel bad about Paco. Like immediately she's like,
I don't think the audience does either.
That piece of shit, I need to save my daughter. And we're right there with her. We're like, hell yeah. Like that's such a cool character,
that's
man.
That's why no one feels bad through the movie. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
I love that she finally gets to really bond with her mother now that she's back from the dead, which is really funny. And, you know, she admits that she knew that they were abused as kids, and their father, another piece of shit.
And more pedophilia, right? I mean, her and incest, right? I mean, this is that Paula is the daughter is actually both Raimunda's daughter and sister.
Also helps.
Hold
on, wait.
Chinatown.
Say that again.
She's her daughter and her sister.
Oh my God!
Raimunda's, she's my daughter. She's my sister. It's Chinatown.
No, I know what you're
Jake,
saying.
it's Chinatown.
I'm just thinking of it in the context of this movie, but whoa.
Yeah.
It's
fucked up.
Yep.
So no wonder Irene was like, I'm just gonna burn down the house that he's in.
And no wonder Raimunda reacted the way she did and left, right? At a certain point.
Completely.
It's totally understandable now.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, but
so there's echoes there again through the family,
She just finally realizes she needs her mom.
Yep.
And it's a beautiful movie. Like I enjoyed this way more than I thought I would. I didn't really know what to expect going in. I went in blind. I read the headline of kind of what it was about, and so you get like a quick gist about that. But like that's that's an important like plot, like theme of the movie.
Yeah.
Just coming back from the dead to resolve certain issues or whatever. But it's also there's so much more.
Well,
there's so much more to it.
Like I said in the beginning of the review, like it somehow is about all of these really dark things, and it is such a deeply, deeply joyful movie. Yeah. Like it really does make you like, I don't know, it just made me feel good by the end of it. I gotta say,
I wasn't sure how you were going to react to both of these movies. I figured you probably would like Volver because it's just a charming movie.
Yeah.
But talk to her. I wasn't sure how you were going to react, and like are we gonna I just love that we are able to do these festivals and kind of realize what people have talked about for so many years.
Totally.
Or we've seen the name and you're like, oh. Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
What else has he done? And you go to IMDb and you're like, oh shit, yeah. Okay.
Well, and you're kind of like, what kind of movies are those? And I love that there is this kind of surrealistic aspect to these movies. I mean, just these two that we've seen. There's like a surrealism and a magical realism and a lot of romance and just beautiful film.
Really interesting. I'm really going to pay attention to how different each movie is.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be really interesting. Well, thank you. I hope you guys are playing along with Pedro Almodóvar. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Please follow and like us, subscribe, do all the stuff that you want to do if you like the show. And next week we have that one scene from Flashdance.
Oh boy, little left turn. So we'll see you guys next week.
All right, thanks everyone.
Bye.